Welcome to Fun Factory Gaming. When Mortal Shell first released back in 2020, it surprised many players by delivering a fresh take on the Souls-like formula. Instead of simply copying Dark Souls, developer Cold Symmetry built its own identity around the unique shell mechanic, methodical combat, and an oppressive world filled with mystery.
You think you're one of them? You're not. You hatched here, but you belong somewhere else. Arise, Harbinger.
While the original game had its fans, it also faced criticism for being relatively short, somewhat repetitive, and lacking the variety found in larger entries in the genre. With the Mortal Shell 2 open beta, the developers are aiming much higher. This isn't just a sequel that adds a few new weapons and enemies. Mortal Shell 2 feels like a significantly more ambitious project, expanding nearly every aspect of the original experience. After spending time with the beta and looking at the broader reaction from players across Steam and gaming communities, one thing becomes clear: the sequel is generating considerably more excitement than many expected. That doesn't mean everything is perfect. Like most early beta versions, there are rough edges, technical issues, and gameplay elements that still need refinement. However, the foundation is strong enough that many players are already calling it one of the most promising upcoming Souls-like games. One of the biggest strengths of Mortal Shell 2 is its atmosphere. From the very first moments, the game establishes an unsettling tone that feels familiar, yet distinctly its own. The environments are dark without becoming visually repetitive, and there's a constant sense that danger is hiding just beyond the player's field of view. Rather than relying on cheap jump scares or excessive horror elements, the game creates tension through environmental storytelling, haunting architecture, unsettling enemy designs, and excellent sound design. Wind whistles through abandoned ruins, distant creatures emit disturbing cries, and every location feels abandoned by civilization long ago. Many players have compared this atmosphere to a blend of Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and even a touch of classic dark fantasy horror. Yet despite those comparisons, Mortal Shell 2 maintains its own identity, instead of feeling like an imitation. Environmental storytelling appears to have received a major upgrade as well. Instead of directly explaining every detail, the game encourages players to piece together its lore through exploration, item descriptions, NPC dialogue, and visual clues scattered throughout the world. For players who enjoy uncovering hidden stories rather than having everything explained through lengthy cutscenes, this approach remains one of Mortal Shell's strongest qualities. Visually, the improvements over the original game are immediately noticeable. Lighting is significantly more advanced, creating richer contrasts between darkness and illuminated areas. Character models feature far more detail, armor textures appear sharper, and enemy designs showcase impressive levels of craftsmanship. The environments themselves feel larger and more alive. Dense forests, ruined castles, forgotten temples, underground caverns, and corrupted landscapes all possess their own distinct identity, instead of blending together. Many Steam players specifically praised the game's artistic direction, noting that even when technical performance isn't perfect, the visual design consistently impresses. Instead of chasing photorealism alone, Mortal Shell 2 focuses on creating memorable locations filled with atmosphere and personality. This artistic consistency helps elevate the overall experience. Another area receiving widespread praise is exploration. One criticism of the first Mortal Shell was that its world occasionally felt limited in scope. The beta suggests that Cold Symmetry has listened carefully to that feedback. Levels now feature multiple interconnected paths, optional routes, hidden treasures, secret encounters, environmental puzzles, and rewarding shortcuts. Exploration feels meaningful rather than simply leading toward another combat encounter. Players frequently mention discovering hidden weapons, valuable upgrade materials, lore items, and optional bosses by thoroughly investigating the world. That sense of curiosity is one of the defining qualities of great Souls-like games, and Mortal Shell 2 appears to embrace it far more confidently than its predecessor. Verticality has also improved considerably. Instead of primarily traveling across flat environments, players climb ruined towers, descend into ancient crypts, navigate dangerous cliffsides, and uncover hidden passages tucked beneath larger structures. This layered level design encourages observation. Players can spot future destinations from distant viewpoints before eventually reaching them hours later, creating satisfying moments of geographical realization, similar to some of the genre's best examples. The enemy placement further reinforces exploration. Rather than endlessly spawning enemies, encounters often feel intentionally designed. Different enemy types guard specific locations, forcing players to consider positioning, spacing, and timing before rushing into battle.
With purpose.
Another notable improvement lies in the game's pacing. Unlike some Souls-like titles that throw relentless combat at players every few seconds, Mortal Shell 2 balances quieter exploration with bursts of intense action. Those slower moments allow the atmosphere to breathe. Players have opportunities to absorb environmental details, listen to ambient audio, search for secrets, and mentally prepare before the next difficult encounter. This rhythm helps maintain tension throughout the experience, instead of exhausting the player through non-stop combat. The soundtrack deserves recognition as well. Instead of dominating every moment, the music is used selectively. Many areas rely primarily on environmental sounds until battles intensify, allowing dramatic musical themes to hit much harder when they finally appear. Boss encounters especially benefit from this restrained approach. The orchestral compositions amplify the scale of major battles while preserving the game's oppressive atmosphere. Voice acting also appears stronger than before. NPC performances feel more believable, mysterious, and emotionally restrained, fitting perfectly within Mortal Shell's bleak universe. Rather than over-explaining the plot, characters often speak cryptically, encouraging players to interpret the meaning behind their words. Fans of From Software-style storytelling will likely appreciate this approach. One aspect repeatedly highlighted across community discussions is how much more confident the sequel feels. The original Mortal Shell occasionally gave the impression of a talented independent studio working within limited resources. Mortal Shell 2 still retains that independent identity, but the increased ambition is immediately obvious. Nearly every system appears larger in scale. The environments are more intricate. Enemy variety has increased. Visual quality has improved. Animations feel smoother. Exploration feels deeper. Even players who were only moderately interested in the original have commented that the sequel appears capable of standing alongside much bigger releases within the Souls-like genre. It's important to remember that this is still an open beta. Performance issues remain one of the most commonly reported concerns. Some players experienced inconsistent frame rates depending on hardware configuration, while others encountered occasional stuttering during larger combat encounters or when entering new areas. Fortunately, because this is an open beta, many players view these issues as expected growing pains rather than deal breakers. Cold Symmetry has already acknowledged player feedback and appears committed to continued optimization before launch. That willingness to actively listen to community feedback has also earned praise. Throughout discussions, many players expressed confidence that the developers are genuinely interested in polishing the final product rather than treating beta feedback as a marketing exercise. As a result, community sentiment remains surprisingly optimistic despite the technical shortcomings. So far, Mortal Shell 2 succeeds where many sequels struggle. It doesn't abandon the identity that made the original memorable. Instead, it expands nearly every aspect while preserving the oppressive atmosphere, deliberate exploration, and mysterious storytelling that defined the first game. If the remaining gameplay systems can match the quality of its world design and atmosphere, Cold Symmetry may have something genuinely special on its hands. Let's talk about the area that matters most in any Souls-like game: the combat. If there's one aspect that has surprised players the most during the open beta, it's just how much the combat has evolved. The original Mortal Shell was known for its deliberate, almost methodical pace. Every swing carried weight, every dodge required commitment, and the signature hardening mechanic encouraged players to think carefully before attacking. That identity hasn't disappeared, but it has changed. Combat in Mortal Shell 2 feels noticeably faster and far more fluid. Animations transition more naturally between attacks, dodges feel more responsive, and movement generally feels less restrictive than before. Rather than simply standing toe-to-toe with enemies and waiting for an opening, players are encouraged to stay mobile, mix offense with defense, and adapt to changing situations. For many players, this is exactly what they wanted. The first game's combat, while unique, could occasionally feel stiff. The sequel maintains the satisfying impact of heavy weapons, while introducing a level of responsiveness that makes encounters feel more dynamic. Every successful parry, perfectly timed dodge, or well-executed counterattack delivers a satisfying sense of control. Weapons continue to be one of Mortal Shell's strongest features. Each weapon feels distinct not just because of its damage numbers, but because of its rhythm. Larger weapons hit incredibly hard, but leave the player vulnerable if attacks are mistimed. Faster weapons sacrifice raw damage in exchange for speed, flexibility, and the ability to recover more quickly after each strike. This balance encourages experimentation. Instead of simply searching for whichever weapon has the highest damage output, players naturally gravitate toward the moveset that best fits their preferred playstyle. That level of identity is something many modern action RPGs struggle to achieve. Enemy variety has also received significant praise. During the beta, players encounter a much broader selection of enemies than in the original game. Some rely on overwhelming aggression, forcing quick reactions. Others attack cautiously, baiting the player into making mistakes. Certain enemies coordinate their attacks surprisingly well when encountered in groups, creating situations where positioning becomes just as important as timing. This increased variety helps prevent combat from becoming repetitive. Even after several hours, encounters continue introducing new attack patterns and enemy combinations that require different strategies. Boss fights are another highlight. Although the beta only offers a limited selection, the bosses demonstrate impressive creativity in both visual design and mechanics. Each encounter feels like more than just an enemy with a larger health bar. Bosses feature multiple attack phases, delayed strikes designed to punish panic dodging, wide area attacks, and moments that reward patience rather than aggression. Several players commented that learning these encounters felt rewarding rather than frustrating. Death rarely feels unfair because the attacks are generally well telegraphed. Success comes from observation, practice, and gradually mastering each encounter instead of relying on luck. No Souls-like would be complete without challenge. Mortal Shell 2 remains difficult. Enemies hit hard. Healing opportunities remain limited. Mistakes are punished quickly. However, many players believe the difficulty now feels more consistent than in the original game. Instead of random difficulty spikes, progression appears smoother, allowing players to steadily improve alongside the increasing challenge. The shell mechanic, one of the defining features of the franchise, also returns with meaningful refinements. Without spoiling too much, the system appears more flexible and integrated into overall character progression than before. Rather than feeling like a novelty, switching between different shells now plays a larger role in defining builds and combat strategies. Players who enjoyed experimenting with different playstyles in the first game will likely appreciate these improvements. Progression as a whole seems deeper. Character development offers more meaningful choices, encouraging specialization without completely locking players into a single approach. That additional flexibility has been widely praised because it increases replay value while allowing players to adapt their build depending on the challenges they face. Exploration and progression also complement one another. Hidden areas often reward curiosity with valuable upgrades instead of simple collectible items. Discovering an optional path feels worthwhile because there's a genuine chance of finding something that meaningfully improves your character. That sense of reward keeps exploration engaging throughout the beta.
Your shell serves you as a brother.
Now, despite all this praise, the open beta isn't without its problems. The most common criticism concerns technical performance. Across Steam reviews, many players reported inconsistent frame rates, occasional stuttering, and brief performance drops during larger battles or while loading new sections of the map. These issues don't affect everyone equally, suggesting optimization still needs work across different hardware configurations. Another recurring criticism involves balancing. Some enemy encounters become overwhelming due to the number of opponents attacking simultaneously. While group fights can create exciting moments, there are occasions where the camera, limited space, and aggressive enemy behavior combine to produce situations that feel more chaotic than challenging. This is particularly noticeable in tighter environments, where multiple enemies can surround the player from several directions. A few players also questioned certain combat balance decisions. Some weapons currently feel stronger than others, reducing the incentive to experiment once players discover particularly effective options. Similarly, a handful of enemy attacks can feel slightly inconsistent in terms of hit detection or tracking. Again, these are exactly the types of issues beta testing is designed to identify. Another interesting point raised by longtime fans concerns the game's faster combat pace. While many players love the increased speed, others feel that Mortal Shell is gradually moving closer to the style of other popular Souls-likes, rather than preserving the slower, more deliberate identity that originally made it unique. It's an understandable concern. The first game carved out its own niche through patience and calculated combat. As the sequel becomes faster and more action-oriented, some veterans worry that part of that identity could be lost. Whether this ultimately becomes a strength or weakness will likely depend on personal preference. New players may find the sequel far more approachable. Veterans who preferred the original's slower tempo may need some time to adjust. One aspect that deserves special recognition is the developers' communication with the community. Throughout the open beta, players consistently expressed appreciation that Cold Symmetry appears genuinely interested in gathering feedback. Many reviews specifically mention confidence that reported issues will continue being addressed before launch. That level of transparency helps build trust, especially during an early testing phase where bugs and balance concerns are expected. Looking at the overall community consensus, it's difficult not to be impressed. Steam users have overwhelmingly praised the game's atmosphere, world design, combat improvements, visual presentation, and ambition. Gaming communities have echoed many of those same opinions, describing Mortal Shell 2 as a sequel that expands nearly every successful idea introduced in the original. Perhaps the greatest compliment players continue giving the game is that it no longer feels like a smaller alternative to bigger Souls-like titles. Instead, Mortal Shell 2 increasingly feels like a serious competitor capable of standing on its own merits. That's an important distinction. Rather than constantly comparing itself to From Software's work, Mortal Shell 2 appears confident enough to develop its own identity through distinctive mechanics, memorable environments, and satisfying combat. Of course, it's still too early to declare victory. This is only the open beta. The final game will need to address optimization, polish, balancing, and any remaining technical issues before release. But based on what's currently available, the foundation is exceptionally promising. If Cold Symmetry successfully refines performance while maintaining the quality of its combat, exploration, and atmosphere, Mortal Shell 2 has every opportunity to become one of the standout Souls-like releases of its generation. Let me know in the comments below, what are your expectations for Mortal Shell 2? If you enjoyed my work, please show your love by giving it a like and considering subscribing. As always, thank you for your support and friendship.